Hello. Now in this video I'd like to cover two things. That's the second positioning and what that is, and also something called the 51% rule, which was first published I think in 2000, now in second edition in the book Me, Myself, My Team. But let's start with second positioning. What is it? Why is it called that? And why is it useful? Why would we be talking about this in the context of leadership and motivation? Second positioning is, in a sense, getting into the shoes of someone else. So when we ask someone to get into someone else's shoes, what we're asking them to do is not have a logical thought about what they might be thinking, what they might be doing. It is more likely to encourage them to actually be them. Now that sounds a bit spooky, but it's literally moving from where one is at the moment in terms of here I am, I'm sitting on this chair, I'm talking to you, but in a moment I've perhaps had an issue with somebody. I'd like to return to that particular situation, but as I take my mind back to that situation, I'm going to perhaps move and go and sit somewhere else in the space. I'm not going to do that now, by the way, but I would be thinking about moving to another space in the room that I would go to, and as I move to that space in the room, I will become that person. So I will become their gender, I'll become their age, I'll have that sense of who they are, how they hold themselves, how they talk, what their motivations are as I understand them, what their demotivations are, what their sensitivities are, what their preferences are, and would try and become that person in that situation that didn't go too well for me at the time. So that isn't thinking about them and analysing them. There's a bit of that to start with, which I'm doing here. It's the process by which I become that person in that situation, and then am looking at Angus MacLeod in another chair in the space, as a virtual Angus MacLeod in the space, in that situation, and what then I'm thinking and feeling as that person in that reality. Now it sounds very spooky, but it's a phenomenally powerful tool. Not because it necessarily provides the right answers, but because it gives insights. And whether the insights are wrong or whether they're right almost doesn't matter. That's a funny thing to say, isn't it? Why wouldn't that matter? You know, what are we doing it for? Well, what we're getting are some clues, some insights that we bring back, and then that then colours the way in which our mindset is reframed and how we then approach them in the future. So we can make this a lot more sophisticated, but I just want to get across this context, this idea of becoming that person, getting some information about how they are in that situation and learning something. So if I may, let me give you an example of a meeting I had some years ago. It was a business-to-business meeting. The chap I was talking to is probably early 60s, enormously successful, very rich. He had nursed and created and developed a phenomenal technology on an international basis, and we were selling a number of his products and a number of downstream products that we manufactured in the environmental sector at the time. So going back maybe 8 or 9 or 10 years. And in that meeting, I think there were 5, maybe 6 people, 2 or 3 on their side, 2 or 3 on our side. We got about 40 minutes in, 45 minutes in. I tend to get bored around about 45 minutes, so I sort of sat back a bit and in that meeting, and I second positioned. I had the time for a few moments just to imagine what it was like in reality to experience, not to think about being him and how he thought as a third party, but to be him, to become his age, to have the sense of having created this great product and downstream products, but also to have developed and grown that business enormously successfully and over many, many years. And as I did that, and I sat as him in that space, I had the sense that he really wanted to give us the business, to take on the business. I got the sense that he wanted to, he had a sense of the preciousness of this baby, this thing that he had created, that he needed to trust us as a team, to take it on and honour that product and those range of products that we took from him. And that didn't take very long to do that. But when I went back, if you like, I was still sat there, but as I clicked back into the meeting and I saw him sort of leaning back in his chair, over the next minute or so, when there was an opportunity, I spoke. And I spoke in quite a different way. I summarised our position. I summarised our commitment to the product, our thoughts about the product. So I didn't sort of do lots of strokes about how brilliant he'd been or any of that. Didn't do that. Just talked about the product, how important it was, how it fitted so well to our business, how in a very honest way, perhaps a bit naively from a business standpoint, because it's going to cost us some money potentially to get this if we get this wrong. But that honesty and that approach turned the meeting. So from a meeting that didn't seem to be able to have any sort of resolution, it switched after that small short speech of mine to a completely positive meeting. He sat up, he leaned forward, and within 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes at the most, the top detail of our understandings were itemised and detailed for us to take on that business, which we then did. So that's just one example of how second positioning can take a situation. It might be a conflict situation, it might be a situation we don't understand only. To take those situations, get some understanding, which may not be right, but then that shifts our mentality, our mindset, so that we can then behave in a different way. And when we change something, of course, the world outside tends to change as well. By that I mean other people tend to respond differently to us. Very powerful, called second positioning, and it's being in someone's shoes as a reality, as an experience, not just as a sort of left brain logical exercise. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on is the 51% rule, and I've mentioned that before. And here again, it might be where there is an actual conflict situation, not perhaps a misunderstanding or trying to understand what's going on in a meeting in the example I gave, but perhaps a conflict situation where you're trying to understand what's going on. And the rule is, I'm going to read it off here exactly verbatim as it's published, is in any given interaction, and by an interaction in this context I mean one that's not working particularly well, in any given interaction I'm 51% responsible for the outcome of that interaction. Now why 51%? What on earth is the thinking behind that? Why is it important? Well, simply if we're totally responsible for something, we take on all the responsibility for a relationship, we're being, from a psychological standpoint, neurotic. You know, we're taking all the responsibility. That isn't reasonable. It's not all about us. It takes two to sort a situation out. And that's obviously not going to get anywhere. The 50% isn't much cop because it doesn't really mean that something's definitely going to change. It's a stalemate. And obviously anything below 50 means we're not going to do something. We're waiting for them to do something, which is really not managing anything at all. It's being a little bit immature. So the 51% is just that piece which enables us to be more adult, for us to be mature, whatever our feelings are about that individual or about the situation, and realise that the greater good for the team, for the business, for the organisation, is that the resolution is sorted out, that we move forward together on an amicable basis, and it needs sorting. And also if I operate from that professional, that adult frame of 51%, taking some responsibility and offering some solution, offering the potential to collaborate to create a solution, or to compromise, you know, to maybe give away some of the ownership of something in order to create something together. By doing that, I am going to look much, much more professional. I'm going to look much more like a very good manager and leader than if I was just to have sour grapes and not deal with it. So the 51% is to avoid stalemate. It's to allow us to think, wait a minute, I'm going to take some power and control here, I'm going to exercise my management leadership ability, and I'm going to offer to compromise or to collaborate to create solutions with this individual in the best way I can. Now, of course, stalemate can happen anyway. There are two people involved. If they want to go and lock themselves in a cupboard and not really interact with you in a constructive way, that's up to them. And certainly one of the things that we can do, which comes back again to this idea of mindsets for thinking, mindsets for different things, mindsets for meetings and so forth, is what mindset do we have for that 51% rule. And the mindset needs to be one, I think, again, if we can, of sort of that servant leader. Not that we're falling over, not that we're lying on the floor with our legs in the air saying, I give up, it's up to you. This isn't about that. It's about collaboration, working together to form a bigger outcome than we can either do on our own, or to compromise so that we trade off against one thing against another in order to create a solution. And that's the adult, that's the pragmatic, that's the leadership way of dealing with issues. And the 51% rule, in any given interaction, I'm 51% responsible for the outcome of that interaction. It's that rule that can remind us about how to move forward in situations where there are misunderstandings and conflicts, and do something to make that difference.